see you. It's really nice to be here. I love you all.
Hello and welcome to the Scannain Podcast, your weekly look at the world of film news, Irish and international. I'm your host, Darren Mooney, and joining me are...
Jay. When you're ready, Grace.
We start with an easy question.
Who am I?
Who are any of us, Grace?
The answer is Grace. Grace is here.
You shouldn't have to feed them.
I am Grace. It's just me, Grace.
And Grace.
It is a tough one.
Ronan, hello.
Okay, so normally it's a bit of a challenge to determine who we ask, who we saw first, but it seems like one of our panelists is particularly on the ball this evening. Jay, what have you watched since last we talked?
Fantastic.
You can remember your own name.
Well done, everyone.
This bodes well for me.
Yep. You've seen it.
I've definitely seen some films.
You've plenty of time, Grace. Yeah, okay. All right, I could do it. We'll start off by the end of the month meant the end of the Columbia Noirs on
the Criterion Channel.
RIP. I got to watch, I think, 10.
They were running for more than a month, were they, surely?
No, it was the end of the month when it finished.
They cycle out at the end of the month, generally speaking. They cycle out certain collections and stuff.
But it was there for 2 or 3 months, but I didn't get them all.
This sounds very serious.
But, it was okay. I had plenty of time then. It's like, shit, I haven't watched the last
listeners, remember that
like
anything...
movie all the time.
I would say anything that Jay recommends here, you cannot watch.
Well, you can. I mean, you can find them other places.
They exist.
A lot of them exist on YouTube and stuff like that. You'll probably get them.
Lazy fuckers, just go out and look for them.
Yeah, exactly. But the last one I watched was Experiment in Terror, which is a Blake Edwards noir, who he did this after, I think it was Breakfast at Tiffany's, and obviously predating like Victor Victoria and stuff like that.
That masterpiece.
Yes, one of the greats. Experiment in Terror is fascinating. It's a good fascinating, Darren.
Hey!
For the noir, it's actually quite long. It's like just over 2 hours, which is quite long for a noir. Like they're generally around a kind of 80 to 90 minutes.
Well, you have been spoiled by the Columbia Noir.
Well, that's true. Actually, I have been. And this stars Glenn Ford and Lee Remick and the young Stephanie Powers. Ooh. And this story about a woman who kind of comes back to her home after a day's work, and a guy kind of accosts her in the kind of garage when she parks up, saying that she has to take money from her bank, and there'll be people watching her, and her sister will be threatened and stuff like that, and she's not to contact the police. And it's like kind of kicks off from there as this kind of. And it is quite terrifying. Like the scene in the garage is shot in that kind of noir way, and just kind of one little light shot come in at an angle, and he's this kind of asthmatic voice, so it's kind of this heavy breathing kind of thing, so it makes it ultra creepy in the way noirs can be. But eventually Glenn Ford's the FBI agent who she manages to get in contact, so they have to kind of do a kind of an investigation without being an investigation as such, that they don't let on that they know. So it becomes this kind of weird noir horror hybrid. It's a really dark and strange kind of odyssey. The city looks really interesting. There's great compositions and so much arresting imagery, really strange kind of viewing angles and stuff. And the classic kind of, the classic noir stuff of the blinds kind of across the room kind of thing is all pleasant and correct. Yeah, exactly. But it has a great score. This kind of really off-kilter score by Henry Mancini of Panther fame, which also Blake Edwards would have made later on. It's really good. It's so stylish. I have really, really loved it. It's probably a little too long, to be honest. You could probably knock about 15-20 minutes off of it without really hurting it, but it's very, very good. And so it's 1962 that was, and it's there's a couple I didn't get to, unfortunately, including one I started watching and fell asleep to, unfortunately. So we can't talk about that. But, such as
I wonder what it could possibly have been. Let's not bury the lead.
It was late night. I was tired.
Was it The Big Sleep?
It was the film called The Burglar.
Come back wrong.
A film called The Burglar, which I'd never heard of, and I saw about 40 minutes of, which I was really enjoying, and then woke up for the last 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking of a different film that you gave up on. Sorry.
Oh, no. This one, the noir ones, I tried to squeeze another one in. It was a little foolhardy at a kind of late evening thing. But I'll be back to the other one I gave up next week, perhaps, because I may watch the end of it. But it was dreadful. Anyway.
It sounds pretty grave, if you ask me.
Thank you, Darren.
I'm not getting these puns. What was the film?
We'll dig it up next week.
Figure it out, Ronan. We don't give answers. We just give puns.
Yeah.
You're dead wrong, though.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can guess again, but I guarantee you it'll come back wrong.
Sometimes they do come back, though.
Yeah. Sometimes, for discussions like this, dead is better.
God.
I'm sorry, I zoned out because I was reading about.
But even Grace
Jake
knows what
Gyllenhaal
we're
and
talking
Spider-Man.
about. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah?
But more on that later.
More on that later.
I meant to mention Booksmart last week, so I'd seen it and didn't get a chance to. So I think because I watched Metal Heart this week, which I'm going to mention now as well, I think you can probably take the two of them together.
Fire take incoming.
Yeah, no, I like Booksmart quite a bit actually. And it's one of those things that I kind of really enjoyed when I was watching it, and I think I gave it like 3.5 stars when it came out, in a kind of slightly euphoric kind of way. But then I kind of lost half a star over the next few days as I thought about it more. And it's a strange one because like the performances are great. The two leads in it are really fantastic. Beanie Feinstein, is it? Feinstein. And the girl, I can never remember her name.
Caitlin Dever.
Thank you, young people that remember these things. And they're great in it and really enjoyable. But I did feel that the second half kind of put the obstacles in front of them were quite artificial. And the joins of the film started to become apparent. And some of the kind of moments within it got a little strained.
So you weren't wild about it?
No, but I think it's a very interesting and very well-made debut. I think it shows a lot of promise. I think Wild is a really interesting director. I think some really nice shots in it. But I wasn't completely sold on it. Whereas Metal Heart, I kind of liked a little bit more. I think it's... O'Connor is a very empathetic director. And he has really good cast in it. Like Jordan Jones, who I've talked about before in I Used to Live Here, she's fantastic. Leah McNamara, Aaron Heffernan, who plays this kind of lovable lunk and actually just pockets the film really good. It's a great little kind of scene stealer, and he does it effortlessly. But it's kind of darkness within it, and they do try to kind of, I think the marketing kind of avoids that a little bit, probably wisely. There's a kind of creepiness to it, Maud Mumford's character. Who's this kind of older, kind of layabout bit of a
guy who was in a band once. Almost important.
We've all met those
famous
guys. But it's really charming, and I really like the end of it too. But very good.
They just weren't ready, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I'd recommend people get out and see it while it's still knocking around cinemas. And finally, I will mention, don't you point fingers at me, Darren. I watched Chantal Akerman's Hotel Monterey on the Criterion Channel because there's a few of her films on. I've seen Gendarme and News from Home. This is my third one I've seen. And it's astonishing. It's a 62-minute, completely silent, and I mean completely silent. No music, no voices, no nothing. Oh. Like there's no sound whatsoever. And it's composed of hallway shots of hotels that last for kind of long enough, 5-10 minutes, anywhere in between those. At one stage, there's a scene where the camera's in the lift that goes up and down. And this hotel is really old. It's the 1972 film, so the Hotel Monterey in New York is now gone, apparently to days in now, but it's like, it's one of those kind of yellowed walls, grimy kind of people hanging around who are a little odd kind of characters in it. And it has this kind of really strange effect that it, like, because it's a silent film essentially, and it's a really interesting snapshot of a time that's long gone. And what I found really interesting, and because Ackerman's a visual director and doesn't really care for kind of dialogue, even the fictional stuff I've seen, she doesn't really care. You start to your mind starts to do a strange thing when you're watching it, that you start to fill in blanks in the kind of sense, because you're looking at everybody going, practically everyone in this film is probably dead now, like, because it's a documentary, right? So, and it's nearly not far off 50 years. It was 3 years before I was born it was made, and I'm not 10. So, and then there's one shot of a woman that's pregnant sitting on a chair, and you think, okay, that baby might be like 40 something now, and probably the only person getting out alive in this film. And it has this kind of really strange effect, that really hypnotic, and it kind of film builds. There is a narrative through line. It kind of starts in the kind of a basement-y kind of part of it, and ends up on the rooftop, kind of doing this extraordinary final shot of a slow pan across the kind of skyline of New York, and the part of it that's not, it's not the Chrysler building and stuff like that. It's a very strange kind of thing. It's really breathtaking. The framing is unbelievable, and I was enthralled for the whole 60-minute runtime, and I would have watched more of it. Absolutely unbelievable stuff. Ronan, you will adore it.
You've won me over here. I'm getting on this Ackerman train ASAP.
Essential. And we have made Zavarda is 80 minutes long, and Ackerman is now 62 minutes long. So, that'll be our future.
That is the decree.
Yes. Go ahead. I am done.
All right, and Grace.
God.
What have you watched since last we talked?
Hold on. Let me try and figure this out. Okay, so the first film I've watched since last we talked is Stoker. by Park Chan-wook, which I really liked. I think I'm all but fully caught up with Park Chan-wook now, except for a couple of his older Korean movies. But this was really good. This really reminded me of Neon Demon in its sense of it being kind of like a lot like a very twisted fairy tale that was very stylized and kind of takes all of the characters and dials them up to 100 and just plonks them right in the middle of this really ridiculous, almost cartoonishly twisted world that's also somewhat like something out of the Addams Family. But yeah, this was really
Those
interesting.
tubs of ice cream from the 1950s, for example.
Yeah, but it was really interesting in terms of like taking that really kind of goth aesthetic and then just carrying it to its logical conclusion. I really enjoyed it. I'm not sure if it's one of his best, probably because he didn't write it, so it doesn't have that same sense of unique symmetry, I suppose, in terms of the way that it's made. But the story is really cool, and I like that it takes the lead character and just basically, like, the whole kind of premise seems to be about supporting her to become this complete freak who just gets in touch with her urge to kill people, I guess. I don't know if that's spoilery. Yes, which we all have. But yeah, no, it's
Darren
good.
Feeling very uncomfortable in this moment.
Darren does not endorse murdering people. So I enjoyed that. What else? Oh, I watched The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari also, which I had never seen before, and also really liked that. This is also kind of a weird one because it's one of those things that's so old and iconic that at this stage it feels like I've seen about 4 million bad interpretations and imitations of it. So then sitting down and watching the original was actually kind of trippy.
Yeah,
you forget
it's a very strange film.
Yeah, but also you forget that silent movies are quite short and quite delightful in many ways. Like the artistry involved and the creativity and the commitment to conveying so much through just sheer force of will. And
like it's all visual, so the creative endeavours in it. Like I remember reading. Sorry, not to kind of interrupt. But I remember reading a kind of. I think it was when a film historian saying that film would have been incredible if there had been another 10, maybe 15 years of silent cinema. So that they would have actually had more time to develop kind of visual ways.
Sound was incredibly detrimental in a way.
Sound kind of ruined a little bit.
Because sound becomes radio. Same way the television is to have the influence.
So when you see something like Caligari, I think it's really fascinating in that regard of the possibilities.
The theatricality of it all and the way, like, in silent movies, the performances are so unique and distinctive. Like, I know it's almost a cliche. It's almost a cliche at this point to bring up people whose careers kind of went to hell after talking movies came in, but you can really see why, because the level of performance that's required to sell something in a silent movie is so specific that you can imagine it being something that only a very very small number of people are particularly gifted at. And the sets in this are just gorgeous.
They're stunners, aren't they?
Really just like something out of a twisted nightmare. It's wonderful. And even the way like that kind of distorted sense of place is used to convey the confusion within the plot and everyone's kind of sense of what the fuck and everything else. Like it's really good. And I really liked how immersive it was, and it really says something that something like that can hold up so well even after however many years it's been.
Probably not far off 100 years.
I need to check how old it is exactly, but yeah, so that was really good, and I'm glad I've finally seen it. I also watched Night Moves, the Kelly Reichardt movie. Which I liked, but not as much as I expected. I think I've only seen one other Reichardt movie, which is Certain Women. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
What am I saying? I get it mixed up with 21st Century Women or 21st
So do I, even though I haven't seen 21st Century Women either.
Which is kind of strange.
21st Century's the Annette Bening one, right?
Okay. And Greta Gerwig, more importantly. But yeah, no, Night Moves it's interesting. I mean, it has all the hallmarks anyway of something that's interesting, but I think Reichardt's style from the two movies that I've seen anyway is so languid and so particular that it's not quite enough to engage me, because I kind of feel like I'm staring at this particularly beautifully realized painting for a really long time, but I'm not getting any sense of depth from it. And even though objectively I could stand back and say, okay, I think I know what character A is going through, I think I know what character B is supposed to represent, but I don't feel like that comes across particularly well. And you just get this impression of a bunch of people. Like the way it's made is really, really good in the sense that it's definitely realized with this really kind of portentous air of dread, and that comes through quite well, I think, especially in the run up to what they're doing at the dam. I think there is quite a good bit of tension there and a good bit of kind of, ominousness and everything else. But that just doesn't translate into the human characters. I felt like there just wasn't enough for me to really anchor to them and follow them through this. And I found myself kind of wishing that I could see what was happening from a more neutral perspective, because I just wasn't invested enough in the characters to follow it all the way through. So that was unfortunate, but it was an interesting watch. I feel it did feel a lot longer than it was, though, which is probably not a good thing. I was sort of sitting there waiting for.
It didn't move. That's what you're saying.
Yes, pretty much.
It's a heavy commitment for one night.
And then I also watched Spider-Man: Homecoming last week, even though it feels like it's been years since I saw it for some reason. Probably because this film is about 800 years long. I don't know why it felt so long when I was watching it at a reasonable hour on a Tuesday evening, but this movie just kept going. And I don't know why it was so long. Like, I liked it in the sense that I like this interpretation of Spider-Man. I think he's really cute, and I like this whole, like, he has this sort of like anchored in the community, he just wants to do his best sort of vibe, which I think is quite sweet and endearing. And the characters in general are quite sweet and endearing, the supporting cast. And Michael Keaton's villain is interesting as well, considering the context of American society in which he's portrayed as this kind of like, how would you call it, blue collar.
Oh, he's a fantastic Trump villain.
Red-blooded American who is sort of effed over by the government and kind of just decides to get his own back in a very particular way. It's not even that. It's like the level of attention to detail where he claims he's screwed over, and he has a legitimate grievance about like how regulation screwed him over and stuff like that. But you go to his house and he uses that to enrich himself.
Yeah, but you go to his house. He's complaining about how he's put upon, how he's like the working backbone of America, and you go to his house and it's palatial. Yeah, like he's not at all struggling, but presents himself as struggling in order to further his own narrative, which is absolutely fascinating. And I would. And
then just to emphasize that finally at the end, if you haven't seen this bit coming, and sorry, this is spoilery if you haven't seen it. The girl whose name I've already forgotten, that Peter is in love with throughout this movie, turns out to be Michael Keaton's daughter. Shock.
Yeah, that was one of the famous Darren has an encounter with the internet moments when I mentioned
it's that not just every day for you.
This is every day now, but one of the early ones was when I mentioned that in Spider-Man: Homecoming, Michael Keaton has a nice house. That was considered a spoiler. I didn't mention that anybody else lived there. I didn't mention that Peter was there at any point in the story. I just mentioned he had a nice house. And somebody yelled at me and said, that's a spoiler for the movie.
That's a lot.
People are weird.
I know.
They're really weird. But yeah, no, this is good. It's just too long, like just way too long. But the thing that I think, and I'll probably come back to this when we talk about the other Spider-Man movie, which just came out this week, which I saw yesterday and we'll talk about in the new releases. The thing that I like about this and the way that Spider-Man was presented in Civil War is that there is a sense in this, at least, that Tony Stark, who appears liberally, but not too liberally, at least in my opinion, is really actively trying to protect him and shield him from some of the wider evils in the universe. And then there's this really weird tonal shift in that sense in the new one that doesn't really work for me. So it's interesting to see the way that's presented here before later movies turn it on its head.
My issue with Homecoming is, and the Tony Stark thing, is that like the arc with Tony is that Spider-Man tries to deal with things that are small and local or whatever, but then gets embroiled in something bigger. Tony tells him, no, you're a kid. You should actually like do kid stuff and like focus on doing small things because that's what you're good at.
Right before he drags him off to Berlin and throws him into the middle of the Avengers.
Well, I mean that's a whole issue with Civil War itself. But even in like Homecoming, is that you have this whole idea of being a friend, quote unquote, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but you have this weird movie insistence, and again, it's something that happens throughout the Marvel films, where the character arc consists of character is told not to do something, they do something, it goes horribly wrong. In a conventional character arc, they learn from their mistakes and they adapt and they don't repeat the same mistakes. But and I think Homecoming is one of the great examples of this, instead of learning that he needs to be small and better and focus on what's important and like trust Tony to handle the big stuff, Peter instead does exactly what he did that caused all the trouble and danger the first time and prevails, which is a very odd arc.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see it that way, but we have argued about this at length, and the MCU is in the timeout corner, and we are not going to hash this up again.
All right.
Absolutely backing up this.
Yes.
All right.
Because I don't want to have to run out of the room with the cake.
There is cake, listeners. Ronan, what have you watched since last we talked?
So we haven't talked in a long time.
And we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this when we get to the top 10. You either saved me or abandoned me. We're not sure. There was another dog movie that we could have gone.
No, because there was never any way that was happening.
It was adorable, though.
A Republican. I refuse to indulge.
He will not take the Queen's shilling in this regard.
So I guess the things I've seen since fall under three broad categories. I'll quickly run through some things I've seen on Mubi. There was Spike Lee's Crooklyn, which I like very much.
Me too.
It has a really fascinating kind of view of, there's an autobiographical aspect of it. Two of Lee's sisters contributed to the script, I should say co-wrote the script. They really create this fully realized sense of the world they grew up in. And there's a fascinating section where they go to the
It's
south,
extraordinary, and its perspective
the camera
changes.
changes very strange. It's an anamorphic lens on it, and there's no kind of correction to the distortion you get with that. It creates this weird sense of seeing yourself in a different light and having your view of the world distorted. Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely fascinating. It doesn't stand up to his very best because I think there's almost a formulaic aspect to the script, that it's a coming of age
It's a slice of life in that regard.
In a sense, there's almost something radical about that, because you don't get that about big, sprawling black families in Brooklyn. Enjoyed it very, very much so. Funeral Parade of Roses is a Japanese queer film from, I think, the 60s.
I missed this. It was 69, I think. I missed it when it was on.
Mad. It's like, it's gone from movie now for a couple of weeks at this point, but if it ever comes your way, well worth catching. It's just a really, really strange look that plays with ideas of genders in this mad, mixed up kind of gangster nightclub plot. Absolutely all over the place in the best kind of ways. It knows that it's all over the place and is playing around with that. And just for its time, fascinating, because the kind of expanse of Japanese queer cinema now is limited. So to think that you got something that was this progressive and weird, and I should say as well that there's a lot of stuff in there that is misguided, but you would expect that for the time. It's really, really unusual. And thrilling to see. It's that kind of stuff that I think Mubi is great at throwing up. I hadn't heard of it before. It has something of an underground reputation. Lemonade is a new Romanian film they had, which just completely conforms to the kind of stereotypical view of what Romanian films are, in that they're dark and depressing and very long-shotted. And I've been complaining about these for a couple of years. I love Romanian cinema. Romanian cinema has done some of the best stuff in European cinema over the last 2 decades almost at this point. But there is a certain thing you get with the way they're received internationally, that more and more Romanian filmmakers think they need to conform to that. They need to make films that are like The Death of Mr. Lazarescu, that kind of thing. And it's quite restrictive, because the best Romanian films I've seen the last couple of years looking at them are comedies that play brilliantly at home but just don't get exported, because we don't export foreign comedies usually. So I didn't like this very much. It's set in the States, and there's a lot of like aggressive, difficult stuff about uneasy sexual relationships, and it's just miserable for no real reason other than that's what people think sells. It's quite cynical, I think. What else did we have? Ricky is a Francois Ozon film. I like Ozon a lot. He makes really playful, interesting films that are always like extremely different. I'm not
quite sure.
Yeah,
I've seen things I've liked. I've seen things I didn't like.
Have you seen In the House?
Yes,
that's one of the ones from the last couple of years I really enjoyed.
I liked it. I did like it. It just, do you have the feeling you're being manipulated by a filmmaker in a way that it just makes you a little uncomfortable?
Yeah,
I've seen Swimming Pool as well, which had a similar effect to me, and very
I haven't
strange.
seen that one,
And I've seen one more which I can't remember the name of, but I don't know. I still don't know where I stand them. I'd still watch more of them.
Yeah.
But I'm still not quite sure where I stand
them.
them.
They're really strange, playful.
Tonally,
you can't quite get your hand around them. They do strange sort of shifts at the last minute. The Double Lover was one that came out last year that I really, really liked. It was one of my highlights from cinema releases last year. Ricky is absolute bobbins. It's his worst film that I've seen by far. It's this whole thing about, it starts as this sort of Dardenne-esque social realism that really works for the first half hour, about a mother who has 2 kids by 2 different men and is struggling to put up with them, struggling to raise them on a factory job that doesn't pay too well. The second child she has had slowly starts to sprout wings, and that's the premise of the film. The child grows wings and flies around, and it's this weird satire that's just quite toothless. Didn't work for me at all. By far, Ozon's worst.
He's quite prolific as well, so
he
brings out
3 films every 2 years kind of thing.
Wow.
But which is impressive that this is the first one I've seen that doesn't work.
Okay.
The front page then is Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau doing Bring That Baby, isn't it?
His Girl Friday,
sorry. It's nowhere near as good, but it's a lot of fun. Billy Wilder made this. He knows what he's doing. Very funny script.
Lemmon and Matthau together are always
Lemmon and Matthau together, absolutely wonderful.
I mean, aside from is it Out at Sea or
I haven't seen that.
What's the one I'm thinking of? The late stage collaboration.
Hey,
There were a
listen, I
couple of late
like
ones where
Grumpy
they
Old
just
Men, so I won't
did
have a
it
bad
all the
word.
time.
Like,
Grumpy Old Men's a lot of fun.
yeah, it is.
It
Has
is.
Anne Margaret as well, which is fabulous.
Yes. And she's great.
She is.
This is the one where they're on a gay cruise, if I remember correctly.
Oh my.
And it's a 90s film as well, which, yeah, there we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
that could be a problem
We
because
might-
there's
I kinda wanna watch that now.
there's the odd line in the front page, which is very sort of, we're in the 70s. It's like, guys, this isn't. Don't be saying
It's
these
Out to
things.
Sea is what I'm thinking of.
Out to Sea.
70s is weirdly...
70s was
There's a lot of
weirdly
that
in
stuff
between.
in it. Yeah, it is, yeah.
There's a character here who is like.
Oh, it's not a gay cruise. That's the one with that's the one with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Roger Moore. Sorry,
Wait, what?
Out to
Hang
Sea.
on, why? No. Don't bury the lead. Don't fuck out to see. Tell me the Roger Moore one. I want to hear about that.
The Roger Moore sort of gay cruise films. You don't remember these? They were like there was a while in the mid-90s. I don't know why. Like there was this obsession with like cruise liners or shit. Maybe because location. Maybe because they're a very cheap location to shoot on.
I don't remember.
So you had-
Maybe.
so you
Hang
had
on.
International
Boat Trip.
waters.
Boat
It's,
Trip.
it's
Tell
from
me something.
2002, actually, to give an example, which is two straight men mistakenly end up on a gays-only cruise.
Okay, that's guaranteed to be
starring
awful.
Cuba Gooding Jr. and Horatio Sands.
That sounds awful.
Yeah.
Who else? There's
Roger
probably-
Roger Moore is the other big draw. Lynn Shay, actually, of like the Conjuring movies and something about Mary as well as in there, for example. Vivica A. Fox is probably the sort of big draw there.
This
Yeah.
sounds appalling.
I can see it now.
I must
Roger
watch
Moore
it.
as the
No,
captain.
Roger Moore is that's exactly the role. He's the guy
Captain
who gives,
Birdseye in it up and that.
Of course he is.
he gives them he gives them advice. I think he ends up being their sort of like
Surrogate dad.
Cyrano de Bergerac sort of type of quality. But yeah, sorry, I was thinking of Out to Sea, which stars Brent Spiner of all things as well.
Brent
Oh.
Spiner.
Yes.
That's a name.
That
Star
isn't
Trek, isn't it?
Star Trek, Data, yes. He of, was it that god-awful one, The Master of Disguise?
No.
Over my head.
All right, then. Anyway, sorry.
And the
was a
best of the
tangent.
movie bunch by some distance. Hadn't seen this, hadn't really had the opportunity. It's the kind of thing that I think you need to be in the right frame of mind. Night and Fog. The
it's amazing.
Yeah, the Holocaust
Good
documentary.
Jesus.
Wow.
Short as well.
It's about 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
It plays, it's, extremely matter of fact and difficult, very harrowing footage, and just, it's one of these great historical documents that, doesn't hold back in any way and letting you know this is what it looked like, this is what happened, this is how it came to happen. But it has this phenomenal coda of the last 5 minutes where it sort of says, this could easily happen again. And watching in the context of now, Jesus Christ, what a smack in the stomach.
That absolutely knocked the crap out of me. And it is that kind of juxtaposition of footage and the urgency of the voiceover.
Yeah.
In that kind of...
Yeah.
And it is urgent and desperate in the sense of... I held it together. I think there was a point where it's like, and all this is woman's hair, and I fucking nearly hit the floor. It's unreal how bad it is. And it's a grave warning of kind of how people can do unspeakable acts.
Yeah.
And
Gay
and where
very
we're in
horror
timely,
that you get
particularly
here.
the week that we've had.
It's 30 minutes of the toughest 30 minutes I watched. I watched it, I think, a couple of years ago, and I occasionally think it pops into my head imagery from it. It's fucking insane.
And it finishes so strongly and saying, this is not about reliving the horrors of the past just as a memorial. This is a warning, a constant present warning. And in the context of the world we live in now, it should be watched a lot.
Out of curiosity, and I know that we're time box here, but I might allow this. The Up series.
Yes.
Do I remember there being some calls for discussion? No?
Yeah, there might have been a little discussion.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because I know that you and Ronan, so Jay and Ronan, have both kind of strong feelings and wanted to talk about it a bit.
we back in the olden days of American Netflix, when everybody had access to it. And it was
American Netflix!
It was, and it was
Back around
also
2012.
Yeah, when they had they had a huge amount more content. There's not so much anymore, but and pretty much you just change a couple of DNS settings and everybody had it. Look, the Up series popped up on it, and
This was just ahead of the release of 56 Up, which came out in January 2013 in the US.
I think it was Ronan's kind of. I think you were doing capsule reviews at the time. About it.
That's the whole series,
And myself and my wife watched it over about 10 days, I think, the whole thing from 7 Up till 56 Up, and then we watched the 56 Up, and it's extraordinary. And in the context of that, this year and a couple of weeks ago, 63 Up aired over 3 nights on ITV, and it's a lot.
It's just got this extraordinary weight of history behind it, and the fascinating thing is that it very rarely has dealt with, the sort of overarching themes of history. It doesn't get into politics very much. It doesn't get into social change. There's a little bit more of that in this episode with Brexit and Trump that it touches on. But previously it hasn't really at all. I mean, people have brought it up at their leisure, but the series hasn't pushed them to discuss it. But you have now the 8th film where you've spent, I think they range anywhere from 30 minutes long to 3 hours long, depending on the episode. This is the 8th installment of it where you're revisiting these people and just the ordinariness of their lives. But it's fascinating, the kind of incidental things that pop up during it. It's originally set out to sort of get an idea of whether the social class you're born into in Britain has a lingering effect on the way your life will pan out, and while it's very much still touching on all those things, it's branched out in much odder, stranger ways where the people, based on what they discuss, they've taken it different ways. I think my favourite part of 63 Up is the point where one of the female participants, and there are only 4 of the original 14, tears ribbons out of the director Michael Apted, who was a researcher on the original but has directed all the 7 episodes since, and says to him, throughout the entire time we've done this, all the questions you've asked me have been extremely sexist. And he accepts that and he puts it all in the film. It's a fascinating chronicle of that kind of thing, the social changes we've had, because nobody would have said something like that to him back in, even 7 years ago, not as much. It's really fascinating. And there are loads of little strands like that have sort of floated out from the various episodes over the last couple decades.
What I found fascinating at some point, and I'm not sure which one it is, probably like 35 Up or something, where the documentary, which is a kind of faithful enough documentary, but then the show becomes folded into it because the people are aware of the participants in the street. So the documentary and the people's reaction to the documentary becomes part of the documentary. So it has this
folding in on itself.
And in an extraordinary way, and still extraordinary ways in that regard. And like 56 Up, if it was about anything, was about kind of a lot of people of that age, their parents have started to die and stuff. Whereas 63 Up, people are kind of facing their own mortality. Yeah. And not to give anything away in that regard. I don't think spoiler culture really works in this regard, but it's absolutely fascinating in that regard. I was in bits watching it, hoping
they'd make it through.
Yeah, because it's extraordinarily tense. Despite being wonderful, because I feel like I've grown up with these people, even though I've only I feel like if I met one in the street, I'd probably collapse. You know what I mean? I feel like I know them intimately in ways that I don't know people I know. It's extraordinary. It's one of the great.
Very glad of the meetup.
It's one of the great documentary of all time. One of the greats, absolute greats. And
in a sense, it's just it's such compassionate, dramatic storytelling, and then under it all, these are real people who exist and are having these thoughts in real life. So the stakes are so much higher when something goes wrong with their lives. And it does have other fascinating stuff, like you say. I think it's around 28, 35 Up where one of them is homeless in Scotland, and another one, after seeing that film, reached out. So by the next episode, they have spent some time living together and helped each other out. And
remarkable.
There's a real sort of meta aspect to it too. The idea of, does taking part in this and watching ourselves change how we live our lives?
Yeah. And if we hadn't taken part in it, would our lives be different and all that kind of... It's remarkable.
There's so much going on with it.
All right, then, in terms of what I watched, very, very quickly. So let's start with the almost weekly at this point, is it even a movie entry, which is Jesus. Anima, which is the Paul Thomas Anderson music video that runs for 15 minutes, directing Tom York of Radiohead, scoring and starring in his own mind-bending visual piece, to quote
In other words, man's middle-age crisis, the movie.
It's grand.
A touch harsh, but I take the point. It's very impressive visually. It's one of the great cinematographers.
It's not amazing. It's not anything you should rush out and see.
It's a music promo video.
It's a music promo video that lasts 15 minutes, and it's
grand.
It's very much in the style of silent cinema, with its sort of very visual storytelling, its emphasis on soundtrack and all this sort of stuff. But it is very, we have an existential dilemma. What are we doing a metaphor for? Man, isn't modern life complicated? Gee, I wish that, man wasn't alone in the universe and all that sort of stuff. But very, very well told. And the soundtrack is quite good as well. In terms of other questions, it definitely is a movie, but that doesn't mean it's any good on Netflix. Shaft. The 2019 reboot from Tim Story, who you may or may not know as the director of, among other things, the two Fantastic Four movies from earlier in the...
Oh, damn. Tim Story's new movie out.
Yeah. Ride Along and Ride Along 2, along with Taxi, Barbershop, and Think Like a Man.
Wow, what a CV.
And
you can really fail upwards as a male film director, can't you? My God.
Really fascinating, in large part because, well, first of all, who wanted another Shaft movie? And second of all, who wanted another Shaft movie like this?
Samuel L. Jackson.
Well, this is the thing. Samuel L. Jackson famously, Samuel L. Jackson plays, he is the son of the original Shaft, played by Richard Roundtree, and is only 5 years younger than Richard Roundtree, which is something to behold.
But he could just de-age him.
That's like in Indiana Jones when Sean Connery was playing Harrison Ford's dad, and I think he's only, 10 years older than him, if even that?
Yeah, if even. And I mean, it's telling that, Samuel L. Jackson's love interest in Shaft is Regina Hall.
Oh, stop.
No.
Yeah, that's it.
I was going to say
now?
how old is she, but I'm not even going to ask.
No.
But anyway, so
Don't be telling me that.
the basic plot
At least
of...
she's not 17.
The basic...
Progress, huh?
Oh,
The
Jesus.
premise of the movie is already on shaky grounds when you start with, well, what if John Shaft's son was a nerd, and wouldn't that be a hilarious comedy? That's already like a bad
nerd and
premise.
laugh at
That wasn't even
as
funny in the
opposed to
80s.
laugh.
No, yeah, I know, right? But then, wait for it.
Oh, God. Is he gay?
You
Please don't
elevate
tell me
to...
he's gay.
No.
Oh, Jesus. I can't
You
deal with
elevate
that.
to, what if John Shaft's son was a millennial?
Oh,
This is a
no.
really...
So he's 40?
No, he's 18.
he's
He's
like
studio executives only
No,
know
he's
millennials.
30 odd. He's working in the FBI, but he's working in cybercrime, so he doesn't have any quote unquote street experience.
He also probably doesn't have a house or any job security. If I'm right.
This is a staggeringly middle-aged conservative man's film. There's a moment where John Shaft, who is like just after excusing a naked woman from his apartment, turns to his son and says, "Your mother did one hell of a job turning you into a fine-ass white boy," to pick one example. He runs through. Yeah, he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, did I insult you? You," and I'm quoting here actual dialogue that I wrote down. "Heteronormative, bi-curious, metrosexual, cisgendered. Please stop me when I tick your box."
He doesn't even know what any of that means.
But yeah,
It's like he went on with random millennial buzzword generator and just wrote down literally everything that came up.
there's an extended joke in it that is painfully
Gobshite roast this thing.
painfully unfunny. And it keeps coming back to it, which is there's a charity at work in the community in Harlem called Brothers Watching Brothers. And John Shaft and every African-American man of the age of 60 or over thinks this is hilarious because they got to change that name, to quote the philosopher Method Man when he makes a cameo in that. It's really, really awful and terrible and backwards and regressive and worryingly racist for a Shaft movie. It's a movie.
That shouldn't be possible, but they found a way.
It's staggering. How can a Shaft movie be
Jesus
racist?
wept,
But there's this recurring motif of I think they call it paternal father figure deprivation running through it, which is this stereotype of the African American father as neglectful and absent, which is really hurtful and harmful and the worst racist cliche, and something that was very much popular in the 80s in terms of portraying the African American community, and it's something that understandably people are very sensitive about. Now, Shaft doesn't just commit to John Shaft being entirely absent from his son's life. It retroactively rewrites John Singleton's Shaft from 1999 or 2001 to say that not only is this John Shaft a bad father, turns out that the original Shaft, who was introduced as his uncle in John Singleton's 1999-2001 version, was actually his father rather than his uncle, and had just been pretending to be in order to abandon him and let him grow up by himself. It's god-awful.
I'm confused and afraid.
There's a weird
I'm
subplot.
never going to watch this.
There's a weird subplot
Ever.
involving possible terrorism at a mosque. Because again, this is apparently
conservative middle-aged man.
Yeah, that's it. But here's the thing: it stops just shy of being overtly racist. There aren't actually any terrorists there, but the film is weirdly invested in the dilemma that the FBI might be seen as being Islamophobic for raiding this mosque where innocent Muslims are praying, because the media will just be all over that.
The media.
It's terrifying. There's a moment where Titus Welliver shows up as as John Shaft's boss at the FBI and complains about, and I quote, his 7-year-old daughter who insists I call her Frank. It's not just bad, it's ugly.
Nah.
And it's not just ugly, it's unfunny. It's terrible. Really, really, really terrible. And then finally I marathon through the Toy Story movies. And they're all very good. They're all very charming. One of my big surprise takeaway was that Toy Story 2 is the best of them.
No, it isn't.
And it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
It's not.
Because
You say that with such conviction.
It is fascinating.
It's not the best. It's not, Darren. It's not.
It is absolutely
Darren,
is.
we just stop.
It is the movie I would argue where Pixar became Pixar. It is the moment where Pixar discovered that, again, you had this theory of existential dread running through the original Toy Story with You Are a Child's Plaything, or the idea of Buzz being strapped to a rocket and so on and so forth. But Toy Story 2 is the first Pixar film that grapples with the idea that love, no matter how pure, is transient, and that no matter how much you love somebody, they will eventually throw you in the trash. You will eventually be disposed of. Not even you will die. You will be abandoned and alone and conscious throughout it for all eternity, and you will suffer alone, and you will never be loved again, and you will carry that weight and desperation with you.
Has this person considered therapy?
And that's it. And most movies,
you can get over it when your heart is broken. It's fine. It's shit in the short term, but you'll be all right.
Most movies would be like, it's
also,
grand.
you're a toy.
Yeah.
Also that.
It's like, get over yourself. You're a fucking wind-up doll or whatever.
That's the beauty of a Pixar film, is that even toys and robots have that existential doubt. And I kind of adore that, like, for a family film in 1999 that was supposed to go direct to video.
I like an existential drama as much as the next guy. But Toy Story 3 is better than Toy Story 2.
I watched
Agreed.
Toy Story 3 is better than Toy Story 2.
What?
I've only seen Toy Story 1, and only once.
Toy Story 3 is, really good. It has a really great ending. It's got a powerhouse ending. I really, really like it. They're all fantastic.
It's great before the ending.
They're all fantastic. And I mean, the prison stuff is great and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't have the consistent existential through line that I think really elevates it. Plus, the toys go on adventures is very good. But I can see I'm not going to convince any of you to the right side of this argument.
Goddamn right you're not.
So we're going to move on
You
to
live in a very particular place.
talking about the week in film news. All right, so in terms
what
of
do you got?
In terms of Irish news, let's talk a bit about July at the IFI. We mentioned a couple of these seasons before, but just to refresh, they have a Bresson season coming.
They do. Bresson, they're doing all 13 of his feature films. They have already started this with Angels of Sin. I think 2 nights ago I went along to it, and it was really good.
Yeah.
Kind of a first film, but really fascinating, and it's really good to see them doing this kind of like comprehensive retrospective where you get to see everything. Yeah. Obviously, it's kind of a hard thing to pull off.
Well, when you have 13 films, it's manageable though.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's nice that's running all through July, and I'm looking forward to it. There are a couple that are playing during the Fleadh, so I'll miss, but I will be reporting back on plenty of these.
Perfect. There's a couple of also musical themed sort of stuff that's happening, documentaries. They're screening Pavarotti on Saturday the 13th of July. There'll be a Q&A after that one.
Will there?
They're also screening...
Jay's going to be front row with all of his questions.
Run.
Leonard Cohen
How do you get
passed...
those yellow bland screenshots into every film you make?
Leonard
I
Cohen...
forgot to talk about Solo.
Leonard Cohen passed away in November 2006,
He did.
just 3 months after his former lover and muse Marianne died. Their relationships explored the documentary Marianne and Leonard Words of Love, which is a new film from Nick Broomfield, actually. So they'll be screening that. It'll be opening on Friday the 26th, but there's a preview on Tuesday the 23rd, which will be followed by a recorded Q&A with director
With Leonard Cohen.
I will be seeing it even before that at the Fleadh.
Ooh, wow, okay.
Yes.
And then the IFI Family Festival, which will be returning on the 26th. We talked about it last week. And their bigger picture selection this month is Iris.
Yes, in sort of honour of the centenary of Iris Murdoch's birth. I'm going to go along to this because I'm reading my first Iris Murdoch novel at the moment, and it's so much fun.
And just to give a quick run through of stuff that's opening at the IFI this month, Never Look Away, Vita in Virginia is opening this Friday. We'll talk about new releases. The Brink, The Dead Don't Die, Our Time, and The Chambermaid. And one that will be exciting to both of our, at least two of our panelists, but I suspect you may be seeing this at the Fleadh, is Varda by Agnes.
You're goddamn right. You'll be seeing it at the
We will.
We'd be
And I will
crying
be
our eyes
seeing
out
it back at the IFI probably
as well.
3 to 4 times.
All right then. And meanwhile, at the Lighthouse, they're hosting a screening of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon with a Q&A by writer James Seamus on July 18th. So the legendary screenwriter, director, and producer will be there for one night only. He'll be discussing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So you can see it there on Thursday the 18th at 6:15 p.m.
It's an excellent
in a
film.
newly restored 4K version as well. So that's very worth seeking out.
I would agree.
Ruzba Rishadi's experimental feature film Phantom Islands is now available on Vimeo on demand. Just to sort of stream and to raise awareness.
This was in festivals, I think.
Yeah, it was
Very
doing the
early
circuit
on
a couple of years back.
Funded by the Arts Council of Ireland under the Real Arts Scheme, it premiered at the Dublin International Film Festival and received 30 screenings in festivals around the world.
The Real Arts strand of funding is very, very good.
Yep.
We generally get very, very good documentaries from it year on year.
It won the Best Experimental Feature at Istanbul International Experimental Film Festival, so it's top of its class there. Had an entire issue of the magazine Film Panic exclusively dedicated to its making. And it's attracted attention from people like Fergus Daly, for example, but even journals including Desist Film, The Arts of Slow Cinema, and Cine Penseri as well. So I would wholeheartedly recommend seeking that out if you get a chance. In terms of other stuff, the Galway Film Fleadh, which is next week, people. And
Yes, it is.
and we will hopefully be broadcasting live from there. I say we, I mean you guys.
We
Darren's
will.
not coming.
We will.
Because I'm no fun.
Something may happen. Something may not happen. We do not know yet.
It's
We
the
will figure
Fleadh. It's all
something
up in the
out.
air.
It would be the greatest thing, and we may be eating pizza.
Do you want to talk very quickly about what you're most looking forward to at the Fleadh? Because they've announced the lineup. We talked a little bit about it last week, but you guys have had a chance to
Have we?
have you
Hang on a
browse
sec.
your sheets, so look at your spreadsheets, pick what you're seeing. What are the highlights for you guys? What are you most looking forward to? If listeners are in Galway looking to grab a hot ticket, what would you recommend?
Contractually obliged, of course, to say the Vardas.
Yes.
But I'm looking forward to, as usual, diving into the shorts. There are 9 Irish short film programs, kicking up a total of well over 60 new Irish shorts. Just really looking forward to diving headfirst into those. And
That's kind of Ronan's.
Area of expertise.
Bag.
Yeah, he likes that. I'll probably get to a couple of them, actually. I'm hoping to get to a couple of them. In terms of films I want to see, Best Before Death, Paul Dwan's new documentary.
Yeah.
Yes,
Very
it's
good.
associated with the other one you did,
Yes,
the KLF one, which is one of your films of the
It's
year
a
so
third,
far.
my second or third. I can't think of the name of it, but yeah, that's exactly it.
What Time is Death?
Yes, it's a death double bill.
Don't worry, he's got that dead to rights.
I do. Obviously, there's a few Vardas being shown as a bit of a season, so we'll also see that. And
So
then,
will you guys be watching any new movies?
yes, there's Joanna Hogg's new film, The Souvenir, which I'm really looking
yeah,
forward to.
that looks to be great.
And there's some documentaries as well. J.R. and Bob Dobbs, I think it's called, a strange kind of Texan documentary. And the documentary, because they're all about 80 minutes long, so, we always get to those. And there's a horror film, I think, called Darling with Pollyanna McIntosh directed film, which is shown one of the late night ones, which I'm hoping to get to too.
There is also, I always pick one film in every festival purely on the basis of its title. This one is The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open.
Just.
Sounds great.
I have that
class.
listed as well. That does sound great.
Where's that from?
I think it's American. It's the story between 2 Native American women. As far as I'm aware, I try not to watch trailers at all, if possible, before I go into these things. But it looks really good and has got great reviews, I think.
All right.
Excellent.
The Fleadh has also announced some industry experts as speakers. So just to run through
I'll
them
be
very
speaking
quickly.
then, will I?
Yeah. James Seamus, who's doing the Lighthouse speech, will be offering the
on
keynote.
tour.
Bought him?
He's on tour. Andy Mason, who's the co-CEO of Altitude Film Entertainment, will be speaking as well.
From a hike, I imagine.
Brenda.
Sorry. That's actually pretty good for
That
me.
is very good.
Yeah.
I know it's a peaks.
It
Give
is.
that man a coconut.
Yeah. Brenda Romero, who's a BAFTA award-winning game designer, artist, and Fulbright recipient, which opened the game industry in 1981. Who's worked on everything from Dungeons and Dragons to Ghost Recon and Wizardry. But yeah, she'll be talking as well, which is kind of nice, sort of broadening out in terms of entertainment.
Great.
30 years of sort of at the Toronto International Film Festival, Michelle Mayhew will be sort of speaking as well. 40 years of operating experience in the motion picture industry. 23 as executive director of TIFF. So she'll be speaking
Very
as well.
good.
So very worth seeking out as well. A wonderful sort of celebration film taking place there. Very briefly, in terms of international news, we probably have to mention this. It is the Halle Bailey has been announced as the lead
Halle.
in Little Mermaid. Halle, is it?
I think it's Halle.
It's Halle Bailey has been announced as the lead in the forthcoming live-action Little Mermaid, which is great. Because if you're going to do
That's
those
the sound of
live-action
me
remakes, you
clapping.
might as well sort of do that.
Give
She's
her locks, damn it.
one half of the R&B duo Chloe and Hailey as Ariel, which would be
I'd
great.
never heard of her,
Melissa
but
McCarthy
good on
is
her.
apparently being cast as the villain as well.
All right,
Because
I
apparently
can see that.
This,
Yeah, I can
this
see that.
remix train is
Who's directing? Do we know who's
happening.
directing?
I don't believe that we have it.
right.
I don't believe we have a director yet. I think that we're sort of
Bring
still
back
deciding.
Sophia Coppola. We were meant to have her Little Mermaid for a while, a couple of years back.
I
right?
imagine it would probably be
yeah.
very
Sophia
different.
Coppola, though, as much as I love her, is way too white for that. Like, I do love
Very
her,
true.
but maybe not for this incarnation of it.
Yeah.
On the evidence of the Beguiled.
I was about to say, and maybe Lost in Translation. I like Lost in
No,
Translation.
you're
I know I'm one of the
Lost
few
in
people who
Translation
still
is
likes.
about her divorce.
I'm still.
I don't like Lost in Translation. It's the only film of hers that I've seen that I don't like, but still.
I'm one of the people who still likes Lost in Translation, but will not pretend that it doesn't have very serious problems. Anyway, on to the top 10.
Yes.
At number 10, Child's Play.
I still haven't seen this.
I've heard
need
good
to get to
things,
this in Brightburn.
but I'm always a little wary of these kind of
You've been
films.
toyed with once too often?
a little bit. I've like there's been 100 of them. They're mostly terrible. A couple of them are okay.
You think the press is just dolling them up?
No. I'm not accepting that.
Not
I'm
worth
not
a stab,
accepting
no?
that. That was a reach. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I'd chuck me out for that.
Yes, I would. That's
No,
better.
it's just set up for the other one. At number 9, it's Apollo 11, which is great.
Oh, I need to see this too.
I saw this in the IMAX screen because I'd seen it before. I'd watched it on my own personal screen at home because it's available.
You have a personal IMAX screen?
No, I did not watch it on my
right,
personal,
okay.
but I went to see it in the IMAX in City World, and it is amazing. Just in terms of like as a visual experience.
Just can I worth mentioning that there's also another Apollo 11 documentary about a Nazi that was part of the
Von Braun, isn't it?
which is very odd. Like, it's just, I keep mixing the two of them up every time I see them. And then one of the posters is like a reflection of somebody on the moon, and the reflection from the thing, and it's a
That's Apollo 11.
swastika.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then that's not Apollo 11.
That's the Nazi one.
That's the Nazi one. That's how you tell the difference.
I don't know if it's like, the moon ones, the kind of comedy horror things.
Like Apollo 18.
I don't know if it's those. I'm getting confused. There's too many films.
There's too many films
Which
about the
ones
moon.
is this?
Yes. You're not over the moon about this.
There are too many Nazis on the moon. I think we can all agree.
We can all
There are
agree
too many
that.
Nazis everywhere, Ronan.
Well, indeed.
But yes, well, one of the things I actually really liked about Apollo 11 is because, and again, you mentioned there that picture, they have the iconic shot of one astronaut taking a photo of another astronaut with the sun visor down, and you can see in the reflection both Earth itself and the astronaut who's taking the picture. And like, that's very much what Apollo 11 is. It's not only about watching, you mentioned this with the Up documentary series, but it's the idea of not only watching, but watching being watched as well. There are moments where they're in the control room and the camera is watching several other cameramen filming things, but you also have the cameraman filming the screen that's broadcasting from inside the spaceship as well. And you have this idea of how the moment is being preserved and narrativized as it's going on. I mean, one of the great things about it is that Apollo 11 doesn't actually feature any Talking Heads documentary. All of it's either pulled from like public record or from the footage that was actually kind of cultivated to make this documentary. It's almost a narrative film just shot with using real footage, which is remarkable. But it's because the narrative is already there, because the narrative's already been formed, you're able to do this. It's able to tell a linear story using real footage because that narrative's already in place. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's a beautiful film about watching and being watched at the same time. I absolutely adored it. Again, which is appropriate for a movie about going to the moon, because in that the argument at Earthrise, the first shot of Earth from the moon, which apparently changed the idea of kind of like how we see the world and how we see each other, and ties into this kind of bigger thing about whether or not monoculture even exists and how you fashion so many disparate views that we have at the moment into a single cohesive linear narrative. And Apollo 11 is interesting, I think, and timely in the way that it manages to stitch together this collection of disparate footage into
It's
a single
interesting to
story.
see the marketing is very much of that kind of thing. Witness the moment we were last one, or something like that. It's the tagline in the trailer, I've noticed. So they're really pushing for that sort of, look, let's all come together.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I mean, it's absolutely fascinating that because you know the story behind this. It was the thousands and thousands of hours of footage. But like the fact that you can take all these different viewpoints and construct a narrative from them is interesting at this moment in time, culturally speaking. It's about as relevant as Nazis on the moon are, which is worryingly relevant at the moment. But yeah, no, I really liked it and would really, really recommend it. And number 8, back in the charts, because of course it is Avengers Endgame.
Woo!
Weekend gross of €25,000 with new footage. This is
What is this new footage of which you speak? Actually, no, don't tell
I was
me. I
gonna
don't
say,
want to know
It's
that.
actually,
Is
I
it a
read about
prolonged
it.
tracking
Do you want
shot
me to
of
tell-
America's
I can
ass?
tell you what it is.
Do you want
It's
me to
Robert
tell
Downey
you
Jr.
No,
back in the truck of money
You
up to
didn't
his
hear
house.
about this? There's a whole running joke in Endgame about Chris Evans' amazing ass, and they call it.
There's a shot.
It's America's Ass.
America's
No,
Ass.
there's not really a shot. You get like there's a quick and they don't really
beautiful.
focus on it. There's not like you don't get to see
There
the camera
aren't
tracking.
enough close-ups of it. That's why I'm thinking if they re-release it with new
And
footage,
again-
maybe there's a slow-mo tracking shot.
And I mean,
of
we
his bum.
talked about watching. It's one moment of being one word.
Speaking of peaches,
We're all
alright.
brought together watching America's Ass.
Yes.
Yeah.
What a world.
I mean, like it does end up with Chris Evans through the magic of like whatever plot convolutions they're doing, watching his own ass. And perhaps I think his spiritual journey
That
of
is
becoming one
America's
with
ass.
himself.
That's not
is
the
through-
question of Ronan. I could see a question for me.
It's
Don't.
changed a lot since I stopped watching.
Yeah, they got quite interdimensional and all that jazz.
At number 7, while also somehow being in the new releases, Ronan, you either let me down or did me a solid on this. It's the Queen's Corgi, which I
We've
got
established
I got
that this film does not have merit.
Yes, absolutely.
I got an invite to a screening of this, and I said there was no way that I was going to see this unless somebody I knew who was enthusiastic about dogs wanted to go see it.
Yes.
Or you could have just
Or
looked at it
Ronan.
and said, you know what, I'll stay home and watch something that I care for.
And let the record show that immediately when you floated that idea, I said, no, absolutely not. So,
Emphatically.
letting you down.
No need
Never
ulcers. Ulcers say no, Ronan says no.
Yeah, the Queen's Corgi, by all accounts, is
Listeners,
Horrendous,
Ronan has
from what I gather.
standards when it
yes,
comes to
featuring
movies.
Donald Trump as a major supporting character.
See, that's literally all you need to know to write this movie off as the
Yeah.
worst idea
As
in the long,
opposed to the
sad
Queen's
history
Corgi,
of bad
the-
ideas.
It's
Yeah.
You could have made a sweet animated movie about the Queen's dog,
But I
and
would
it would
never
have been
see
fine.
it.
But why?
Regardless.
You act as if you lost Jay at any
Yeah,
point.
you didn't lose me at
after-
Trump, I can
after the
assure you.
word
We are
Queen.
way past that.
Yeah.
My point is, you could have made more of an argument for just a generic family movie to exist, and then
Yes.
you put fucking Trump in there.
Yeah, I know.
Je pense que non.
At number 6, it's Rocket Man. And
I
he's
haven't seen
not
it.
burning out all his fuel up there alone, it
I nearly
seems.
started singing Queen. I got confused.
They're close enough.
Has anybody seen this? You've seen
I've seen it.
I've seen it.
Grace has seen it.
I liked it. I mean,
You've
it's-
learned, Ronan, haven't you? You're not doing this again.
Lord, I was dragged to Bohemian Rhapsody against my will.
No, Rocket Man is
You were not
dare I
in
say,
Rhapsody,
grand. It is actually a fairly enjoyable picture. I just don't feel like the marriage of material and director works because it leans into a much more musical / theatrical approach, and I just wish that they had gone with a director who had a bit more visual panache to him.
Like Ron Howard.
Like Ron Howard, yes. How dare you, not Ron Howard.
At number 5, Secret Lives of Pets 2.
9. I got nothing.
No.
No.
Sorry.
At number 4, it's Men in Black International, which is holding on relatively well for a box office bomb.
I still got nothing, but Tessa Thompson looks great and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not good.
Not quite enough to see it, though, unfortunately.
Weirdly 90s. It feels very much like a throwback. It's as if the script was sort of stuck in the 90s and never updated. It's
Grim.
very odd. And it's not good. And it seems to believe that you can make a movie like you did in the 90s, but without like the framework around it
Now, to
existing.
be fair, that is the kind of wishful thinking a great many of us have.
That's-
This has
that's-
just proved our hubris and
that's
why
true.
we should never
In
attempt
terms of
it.
it, that's right. Ronan looks like he's
Yeah,
confuzzled.
wasn't there a whole thing a while back, and I can't remember what, but they were going to mix up Men in Black with another franchise?
Yes, they're going to combine it with
Now
21
that-
Jump Street.
That would have
yeah.
been cool. I would have loved that.
Yeah, I knew it was something that was just
That
baffling.
That was
would've-
stupid.
That would have benefited Men in Black
21
greatly,
Jump
but
Street
would
is
have.
Why hasn't that happened?
What do you mean? Why hasn't that happened?
Because that was such a
Yeah.
weird idea to
Well,
put
because-
out there that you don't say that unless you're doing it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that that's a modern idea. That's an idea that's rooted in this idea of intellectual property and
The
the emergent-
universe.
which is the shared universe in inverted commas. And but it's a modern 21st century
Yeah.
idea.
Lads,
Whereas
can I just take a moment to throw out the Scannain shared universe where Varda somehow gets mixed up with a Nolan movie and like James Badgedale is in it and Michael Bay has directed it.
Oh, I don't know what to say. to
And
that.
Very
Ronan's
close to
cowering in the
Dunkirk.
corner with a dog.
but
Tell me you wouldn't watch that.
I would probably watch that.
Yeah, man.
yeah, the issue of Men in Black International though is that instead of doing that weird monstrous thing that we kind of discussed there, they decide that they can try and do a movie rooted in the star personas of two actors who, and although I love them both very much, are not stars in the way that Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones were when the original was made.
How dare you say that about Emma Thompson?
She's great. She's having a great summer. At number
really
3, Aladdin.
Nope.
Do you want to guess how much this has earned at the Irish box office to date?
Far too much.
64 euro.
4.5 million euro.
3.95 million euro.
Okay, at 2.3 million
for
euro,
fuck's
which is pretty good.
Practically nothing.
That's change. All right. Whoa. Okay. But yeah, so this will be getting out of the way in a couple of weeks to make room for The Lion King, but it's had a very healthy haul since.
How many of
And-
these are there?
Well, I mean, we literally just talked
Literally, we're
about
just
like the
talking
Little
about The
Mermaid.
Little Mermaid.
Has
Yeah.
Disney crossed 20 billion at the global box office
What?
this year?
Wait,
yet?
no, they're aiming for 9
making a
billion.
live action Pocahontas.
God,
billion.
damn it,
The
I
odds
hate
are
it.
that Disney will control will make $9 billion by the end of this year.
We're just going to have to
And
make
the-
our own movies.
At number 2, certain to top Jay's list of
why are you looking
favorite
at me?
films of the year.
Oh, shit, what is it?
Already in at number 1. I'd be surprised if Jay hasn't seen this. I
I'd be
mean, 4 or
shocked.
5 times. I'm fairly sure it being at number 2 is a direct result of Jay's investment.
One of his favorite filmmakers.
Yeah, and one of his favorite writers. Working together with the soundtrack from one of his favorite bands. It is Yesterday.
Oh, this fucking shit show. All right. Yeah.
Listeners, we should point out Jay has not actually seen Yesterday.
And nor will I.
And he is not a fan of Richard
go
Curtis,
on.
just in case
Richard
you didn't know.
Curtis is the devil incarnate as a writer.
I saw a
He's a
tweet
bad
earlier
dude.
saying that Yesterday is like a remake of Notting Hill.
It hinges very much on it. The
Which I
iconography
find
is.
intriguing because I actually thought Notting Hill was kind of good, even by today's standards.
Grace,
it
all I'll
wasn't
say is
terrible.
if you go
Such a low
to
bar.
see Yesterday, I will never speak to you again. That's it's a red line.
Why would you put
Whoa.
this horrible dilemma in front of me when Lily James is right there and I'm contractually
No.
obliged to love Lily
No,
James?
I
and
love Lily
everything?
James, but I'll never forgive her either for this.
Yeah.
Blame her agent.
And
Don't blame
Kate
Lily.
McKinnon.
Sorry,
and
Dylan.
Anna Darmus.
Sorry, them all. I'm sorry. No.
However, I've
They're
also
done.
heard
We're
that
done.
there's
We're done here.
Professionally.
some
we are
egregious
done.
insulting of brunette curly hair, which is just not acceptable.
Fair.
Not acceptable now, lads.
I'm not watching this because it's a
I-
travesty.
I won't watch this because I didn't get invited to the premiere and can't find the time to.
And Richard Curtis is a war criminal.
Yes.
It-
as
Never
Rob
need
Nolan
to
said.
forgive him for About Time.
Yes.
Yes, he
Okay.
is.
About Time is like a fucking awful movie that gets creepier and creepier the more you think about it.
It's the worst
It
film
was
ever made.
pretty creepy the first time I watched it, and that casting Donald Gleason gets you halfway there. But no, I mean the thing with
You leave him out of
None
this.
of this is Donald's fault, possibly. I don't know. I haven't seen it and I won't.
You leave
Because
my
Jay won't
future
talk to
husband
me if
out
I
of
do.
this.
I kind of want you to see About Time just to want to
Just to
see your
get my
face.
response.
but
And in
yeah,
that regard, Grace, see Yesterday so we can hear you rant about it. But if you love it, don't ever
What if
speak
I
to me
liked
again.
it? Like, what if I
Yeah,
came back
that's
and I
the
was
law.
like, lads, we've got another 13-hour situation. Also, because I remember this very vividly, it was July last year when I watched 13 Hours. We are coming up
We're
on
due.
the 1-year
No.
anniversary
Oh God,
of
Grace.
this great moment in the
What have you
Scannain
become?
Podcast history.
my
So
sweetest
life
friend.
is so disappointing sometimes. People are just
Everything you know, Jay.
Maybe
Fuck us
if you
way in
hadn't
the end.
told me that James Badgedale would die before we got married.
I did tell Grace the other week that if they ever get married, James Bell, so I'll die just before
He'll
he gets
die
to the
on
altar.
the altar right in
that's
front
what he
of me,
does in every
and
film.
it'll be great.
Yeah.
That's his
What
thing.
a tragedy, but what a beautiful romantic
What would
tragedy.
imagine a movie where himself and Sean Bean are like partners who are both one
And
day
they're
away
just
from retirement.
staring at
Oh
each
man,
other.
Anyway, but yeah, what I've heard
There's a
about
lot of loose scaffolding around.
this apartment is a death trap. But yeah, one of the things I've heard about Yesterday, which is most interesting, is that all the stuff that's not actually in the movie. So, like, how do you end up with Ed
Like, my
Sheeran if
sense
the
of
Beatles
respect.
don't exist? Because Ed Sheeran is obviously like a product of 90s Britpop to a certain extent. So the guy with the
I was
guitar,
gonna
like
say
Oasis.
you were going down a dangerous
then-
road here if you're
then-
going to compare Ed Sheeran to
No, no,
the
but
Beatles.
hang on. Ed Sheeran is a product of Oasis.
He's the guy
Fuck off,
with
would
the
you?
guitar. The British invasion.
Ed Sheeran is a product
Not Ed
of
Sheeran
every
himself, his
creepy
popularity.
idiot in every
No, no,
party
no.
playing his guitar and creeping on women. That's what
I
Ed
have
Sheeran's
a
a
point of
product of.
information. Ed Sheeran can trace the popularity and success of his entire career to the fact that Taylor Swift put him on her 4th album. And without that
Taylor, you
massive
war
leg
criminal.
up, we would not
A lot
have
of war
known.
criminals
I'm
in
about
this
to say,
film.
the weird nexus of like Scannain Podcast hate has just expanded remarkably.
I know, sorry.
And
Sorry,
my
Taylor,
point
but you're
is
cancelled.
We are not blaming Oasis or the Beatles. We are
But
blaming Taylor Swift.
My-
We must blame anyone.
Yes.
my question is,
Even though
though,
Taylor is a
Go on.
princess.
how do you end up with Ed Sheeran without the Beatles if you lose that connective tissue between
I
the
don't
two?
know.
How does Ed Sheeran happen? More than
Finds
that,
a way.
Can we
More-
spoil the film? John
Here's-
Lennon's alive in it.
Is he really?
Sorry, he
Who
said
plays
that.
him?
I read it. It's fucking ludicrous. I don't know who plays him. Who cares? John Wifebeater Lennon, I might add, is the hero of the film. Would you go?
He's
Would you
not necessarily
stop?
the hero
I
of
don't
the
care
film.
what he is. It's a
I
joke
can't
shop of
believe
a
you
film.
haven't- like,
spoiled this movie before I got a chance
I
to
want
see
it again for the record. Jay has
Did
not
you
seen the
know that?
movie.
Seriously?
No,
Jay
because what
has-
if I wanted to see it, Jay?
Jay
I'm
has
doing you a
not
public
seen
service. Sorry,
this
Darren.
movie, just
You can
to
edit it
I
out
don't
if you want.
suppose
but-
Aaron Taylor
No, it's
Johnson
fine.
gets
I
to
just
play him,
I,
no?
I find that you're like this idea which you read on Wikipedia is the worst thing ever. I have not seen it in action.
taking Wikipedia as a bible in this regard.
No, I know. I
Incidentally, Wikipedia has been repeatedly edited
Yes.
from
Yeah.
the last line in the plot synopsis of this film, and it is a scream.
It is.
highly
I believe
recommend
in the Harry
looking at
Potter
it
one.
at
I
any
don't know
point.
what else.
he
has
wakes
happened.
up and discovers that the stereophonics never existed.
The last time I checked, it was he's the only person who knows 9/11 happened.
Fantastic.
Oh God!
All right, at
Anyway.
number 1, having already earned €2.4 million at the Irish box office today, which brings
Is
it
it
up to
Spider-Man?
beat with Aladdin,
Oh.
is Toy Story 4. Which is beautiful, sweet. And I saw it earlier this week again.
All right.
And I cried. Because I'm a
Darren,
human
you're a
being with
monster.
real life
Right,
feelings.
Darren.
because Darren doesn't cry.
This is the first time I've cried since Dunkirk, actually, which is...
That
I
is-
cried at Dunkirk too,
that
Darren.
is a
That's sort of
I know. But yeah, no,
Sorry.
so it's been,
That's
you know,
me.
so, and it's profound, it's really moving, it's really, really sweet. And it's great because,
I
again...
can't picture you crying.
I can't either. It's difficult, isn't it?
It's really weird.
Yeah, it was.
I can't picture that kind
What
of
are these
lip wobble
water
and
things that fall out of my eyes?
I'm
red
leaking.
eyes.
I'm leaking. But yeah, no, it's incredibly sweet. It's very charming. It's got this, and again, it's got this wonderful ending which feels very appropriate. It's about moving on and letting go in a way that feels like a healthy companion piece to Toy Story 3 as well.
Okay.
It's absolutely
So
fascinating.
when we have Toy Story 89,
yes,
will we still be talking about it?
about Toy Story 4. But no, it's wonderful. I wholeheartedly recommend it. It's one of my favorite films of the year so far.
I'm a little bit kind of upset to find that I don't feel compelled to go to this because I remember back when Toy Story 3 came out, and this was 9 years ago now, thinking like, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea. It's been so long. You know, the exact same feelings I'm having now, essentially. And the film very much ended up earning that because as somebody who like grew up with Toy Story as a kid, it perfectly addresses the whole idea of going off to college, leaving your childhood behind. Like the very summer I was doing the exact same thing. It hit very close to home. And it's weird to me that I don't feel in any way drawn to see Toy Story 4. I probably will, but I don't know if I'm going to catch it in cinemas. I'm just
Disney.
I mean,
it's sort of the grand commercial machine of it now just has me exhausted.
I felt very much the same way when I was sitting down watching it the first time. In fact, that's why I suspect I cried the second time and not the first time. I think the first time I was rather jaded and cynical to a certain extent. Because you know me, I'm jaded, cold, cynical. Like a robot.
crying.
It's true, he is.
And then, the second time it got through to me, just a little plastic hand on a little concrete wall.
That seems creepy.
Plastic.
All right, let's move on to talk about the new releases. So out this week, actually, I think one of us has seen this, Vita and Virginia. One of us has not seen this, Vita and Virginia, which was screened in association with the Gayest Film Festival 2 weeks ago. I'm actually very curious to see this one. This is Elizabeth Debicki. And
okay, Jay?
Yes.
Yeah.
This looks really good.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this.
I shall catch this.
One of us will see this movie.
There, you bet your bottom dollar, Darren.
All right. Also opening this week is The Queen's Courtship, but we talked enough about that. Out this week again is Never Look Away, which was released a couple of weeks ago, I'm fairly sure, but obviously the release date shifted. This is the German artist Kurt Barnard, who has escaped East Germany and now lives in West Germany, but is tormented by his childhood under the Nazis and the GDPR. GDR.
They will not let me at the data. Why won't they let me at the data?
All I want is the email address.
I just want to know what his HR records are.
This film is going to come now that you said it.
Upgrading.
Keep your hands off my cookies.
What is his phone number?
Upgrading my phone was never this difficult before.
I live in West Berlin.
Why can't they deal with me over the phone like they used to? We apologise to listeners for our terrible German accents.
Oh God, I have a headache.
Is that all you apologise for?
All the other material was gold.
I can actually see another movie now. An alternative history where the GDPR are in charge of research. The Stasi are after you for your time and
the
your
lead
name.
character of yesterday wakes up and discovers he's the only one who remembers GDPR.
Let's get editing on Wikipedia.
Good night.
Also out this week, and I'm kind of curious about this, but also filled with existential dread. Ronan, you talked about this when you said Toy Story 3, how could this possibly live up to my expectations and bring closure to all this stuff that I felt when I watched the previous installments?
Oh God, I'm afraid.
It's Escape Plan 3.
No, stop.
Is out this weekend on video on demand and
Now,
apparently
when you say
selected cinemas.
it's not actually coming out.
Well,
It's
they're
sitting
trying
here
to
if
break
you
it
were
out.
There's a
fucking-
bargain bin somewhere you
If
can
you're
find
fucking
it.
stupid enough to go and seek it out.
It's trying to escape, ironically enough. But yeah, so
Sly, you were better than this.
He can be. He chooses
those
not to be.
Chinese investment companies pay a lot of money. Apparently, it's fascinating. One of the things I've read about it that makes me kind of want to see it is
Darren,
the
you're
way.
seeing it. Nobody doubts you're seeing
Oh,
it.
I'm holding a copy of Escape Plan
He is,
2
he
in my
literally
hand.
is.
Baby Driver
Like,
isn't
not
on Terry
metaphorically.
that night.
Yeah, not metaphorically. I'm holding a copy of
He's
Escape
not. He's
Plan 2
actually
in my
holding
hand.
on Blu-ray.
Yeah, that's it. But like the thing
Wait,
about
did
Escape,
you order this with like and pay for it?
Whose money?
Did you pay cash money for this thing?
I choose not to answer on the grounds it may incriminate me.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, so the issue with Escape, the thing that I've heard about Escape Plan 3, which makes me very curious about it, is that apparently
Curious.
it balances two competing masters. On the one hand, what?
Batista?
No, allegorically and metaphorically in what it's trying to do. So it's trying to appeal to the rural Trump crowd in that it's set in rural Iowa.
Right.
But it's also trying to appeal to that lucrative Chinese market.
So it's 3 characters are Chinese or something, is it?
Yeah, but it's it's about somebody who's kidnapped from Iowa to a Chinese prison, but it's okay because they're doing a deal with a Chinese cell phone manufacturer that will bring jobs to the Rust Belt. Oh yeah, no. Like, this is the thing about Escape Plan 2. Escape Plan 2 is about somebody who works at an anonymous Chinese cell phone company, but who's been kidnapped in order to provide the cynical American capitalists who have abducted him with a back door into the data network. Of course, he's put in
That's not even subtle.
No, but this Chinese developer is put in a situation because, the network is unhackable. There is no backdoor. The encryption is so perfect that even he can't hack it. So why wouldn't you buy a Chinese cell phone? I mean, seriously.
Have they considered hiring Hugh Jackman from Swordfish?
All right, and out this week as well, because it's a big release. It's a big weekend in terms of release, I suspect, because it's July 4th in the States. Midsummer.
Murders.
I believe someone remarked that's what's going to happen on this podcast when any of us see it.
Yeah.
It's hard
Ari Aster's follow-up to Hereditary.
Hard to quantify the excitement around the table right now.
No, you'll
We've
notice
been
that
fit to
Jay
Is the
bursting
number
all week.
zero? Is it
speaking.
Zero is a quantity.
We are being very polite.
I'm not saying a word.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to see this.
I will probably see
let's
this.
see what happens.
Yeah, I will probably see this.
Speed.
147 minutes.
Yeah,
People
that's
are
off-putting.
Very excited about this. People who've seen it are very enthusiastic about
Yes.
it. And I mean, I'm glad that people are happy.
I'm not.
Would they stop?
Would they stop?
Would they stop? Out this week, interesting enough, I'm kind of curious where's actually screening this. Luc Besson's Anna.
Oh, it's
Sorry,
been
is he
asked for
still a
this,
thing?
isn't it?
I thought
Right?
that-
Luke Besson is a creep.
No,
and
no,
he should
actually,
not fund
he
anything
somehow
he
managed
ever
to
does.
avoid
How's
that.
that possible?
France has a weird cultural relationship to this. There's
Weird
the whole
cultural relationship with sexual harassment.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's considerably more acceptable in France, which is
Well, wasn't that
horrifying.
part of the backlash to Me Too came from French actresses?
Absolutely. They very much over there are sort of like, that is how men behave.
President, daddy mistress. Anyway.
But anyway, Anna is
That's wrong for you,
opening, starring Sacha Lewis, Helen Mirren, Luke Evans, and Cillian Murphy.
Oh, jeez,
Cillian
that's a
Murphy,
bad look, lads.
WTF?
Disappointed in all of these people. You're better than this, Helen.
And the big release of the week, it's Spider-Man Far From Home. I believe Grace has seen this.
I have seen this. I saw this last night. And I liked it. An equal amount to the amount that I liked Homecoming, all of which is rooted squarely in Tom Holland. So I'm not even going to lie. But no, this isn't...
Is it Mr. Holland's opus?
Oh,
Stop.
God.
I want to call this an interesting picture, but I feel like that word has been destroyed on this podcast. Just destroyed. So...
What?
Yeah, it has certain
Is it fascinating?
connotations. It's not fascinating. No. There are parts of this that I think are interesting. It's a very strange tonal shift in part. Like I was saying earlier, like from my perspective, because opinions on the MCU differ in this room, Homecoming and to a certain extent in Infinity War, I read Tony Stark as trying to shield, if you'll pardon what could possibly be a pun.
Yeah, no, that's solid pun. Solid pun.
Peter from some of the wider evils in the world, and you can read into that whichever way you like. But in this movie, because Tony is, spoiler, dead after Endgame, Peter is kind of just left to his own devices, and also obviously Peter was snapped back into existence at the end of Endgame. So, and very conveniently, most of his class seem to have been snapped back into existence too. So he actually knows everyone, and it's like
That's
nothing
nice.
has changed. But yeah, anyway, so this movie is basically about Nick Fury just stalking him and constantly intimidating him into coming to save the world from these interdimensional beasts that may or may not be Jake Gyllenhaal as a hologram. That's a lot of spoilers, sorry. Anyway, so it's kind of weird because it feels like you sort of moved from this situation where you are quite happy to portray Peter as your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man who's much more small scale and worried about his neighborhood and just kind of wants to help the people around him, into literally guilt-tripping someone who's for all intents and purposes a teenager into saving the world because the Avengers aren't really there anymore. So that's kind of weird. I don't think the film really knows what to do with it. And you end up with that sort of just hanging around the outside of what could otherwise have been a relatively fun high school
Straightforward kind of thing.
school trip movie. Because the rest of it is quite cute. Now, I do think there are too many characters in it and it's too long, which is the same problem I had with Homecoming. So it means that you get sort of snippets of everyone instead of any real depth anywhere. But that is kind of the trade-off you get in the MCU. You always have tons of people and tons of stuff going on. But yeah, so it's kind of strange in that sense, but it is enjoyable. I liked it. Jake Gyllenhaal is very fun. His plot twist character moment really reminded me of Edward Nygma in Batman Forever, which I obviously greatly appreciate. Down to the way there's parts of this where he has little green targeting lasers sticking out of people's foreheads, and I was like, oh, you went there. I know where you got that. You're going to try and tell me you didn't get it from Batman Forever, but it was Batman Forever. So, yeah, it's enjoyable. And the mid-credits sting, which probably should have been the last scene of the movie, is very fun and actually sets up something quite interesting for what may come next.
What I will say is I actually think this is a pretty solid film. It's
Jesus.
No,
I'm going to faint.
No, I know it is. It's well constructed. It's fun. The cast are absolutely charming. It works very well when it does. Like Spider-Man Homecoming worked best when it was sort of a John Hughes riff in a superhero costume. This is best when it's sort of like a low-key superhero movie.
Low-key,
see what you did there. But it's sort of low-key kids on vacation having fun in Europe film. And what's interesting is we've reached the point where the movies are so big. And it happens with every franchise. It happens, for example, with the James Bond movies where you hit like GoldenEye, Casino Royale. It happens with Doctor Who, and it happens with Star Trek, where you have this thing where even Star Trek Enterprise, pick an example, where something has been running so long that inevitably becomes a certain extent about itself. It's ironic with the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it's only been 10 years, but it's been 23 films. So you reach a point where the Marvel Cinematic Universe is almost about itself to a certain extent. And what you have with Far From Home, and Grace pointed out there with Nick Fury, and kidnapping. The word kidnapping is actually used by Mysterio, by Quentin Beck at certain points to describe it. He's not paying, he's not drifting off. He's just thinking about how you kidnapped him and all his friends. But the idea in Spider-Man Far From Home is that Spider-Man is being abducted from his role as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and dropped into a Marvel Cinematic Universe film, right down to the fact the plot is actually structured as an explicit parody of Infinity War and Endgame. You have this narrative with a 3D hologram where Quentin Beck narrates about the history of the universe and the elemental forces that date back to predate existence, which is very much riffing on a specific scene from the start of Infinity War. But this idea of collecting things, going on a little fetching quest, which is the plot of Infinity War and video games and stuff like that. But the idea you can combine those things and they become stronger, like, Power Rangers, or wait, you're thinking of Voltron. But this idea that runs through it of like, Peter Parker, who is supposed to be this small kid who's having a wonderful time and supposed to be this low-key hero, getting sucked into a CGI blockbuster spectacle, right down to the casting of Quentin Beck as an auteur, who's like, I want more, I want passion, I want anger, I want emotion. There's points where he's like revising the script as he's literally shooting. Yeah. It's astounding. And Gyllenhaal is amazing. And you watch for the first half and it's like, you can see, you're wondering what's Gyllenhaal doing here. It's very much, it's a crisp performance.
It's very obvious what's going on.
It is very obvious what's going on, but like when you hit the second half, you see why Gyllenhaal took the job. Gyllenhaal took the job because it's like you get like PG-13 Nightcrawler, that sort of performance going on where there's a little bit of like the prima donna, a little bit of scenery chewing, a little bit of him having a great deal of fun with what I'm doing.
Well, there's a bit more levity to it than that because I think like Jake Gyllenhaal has been trying to convince us all that he's some great dramatic actor for the past few years, and it's like, Jake, calm the fuck down, have the crack occasionally. And he actually manages to do that here, I think. And also he actually looks healthy for the first time in several years, which is nice. Yeah. It's like, Jake, you had a sandwich. I'm proud of you.
This is a movie where like the supervillain ends up in a green screen suit for an extended portion of it, and I absolutely adore that aspect of it. Very literally.
They're holograms.
It's very much about spectacle and about construction, about this idea of movie making and event storytelling and stuff like that, and how difficult it is. And it's about the MCU to a certain extent, I would argue. And I think it works well when it broaches those ideas. I don't think it sticks the landing. The film's central conflict is this idea of being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man or being the next Iron Man. And the idea with Spider-Man is that Spider-Man's a distinctive brand and character who has a long history and a persona that people recognize. He has an iconic costume, an iconic look that people look at and see and think that's Spider-Man, and they know what it is. He has a catchphrase, with great power comes great responsibility. He has a cartoon. He has a theme song that people can hum. Can people hum an Iron Man or a Thor or Captain America theme song off the top of their heads? That sort of thing.
I probably could.
But I mean...
but I'm me.
But you have that sort of tension within there. And the question at the heart of the film is Peter Parker a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, or is he the next Iron Man? And the film's answer to that, and I think, Grace described as a tonal imbalance. I would agree it's an imbalance. I think it's more thematic, but it is also tonal. Is the film doesn't know how to answer that in what should be, when you look at the structure of the film, the right answer. And I won't say more because that's probably too much of a spoiler. But yeah,
We spoiled literally everything.
that's a fair point. It does feature.
That's on me.
It does feature. It does feature Peter Parker constructing a new suit with holograms. The theme of Black Sabbath's AC/DC's Back in Black,
To which he says he loves Led Zeppelin. God bless him.
But it's this idea. He literally becomes Tony Stark.
Holland's great though, isn't he?
Holland is very good. He's a very charming young performer.
I really like him.
He's really good. Anyway, so that about wraps it up. But if people look for or Jay, a bit more Grace, a bit more Ronan in their lives, where can they find you guys?
I'm spoiling movies on Twitter at @JCoyle.
Literally and figuratively.
Yep.
I am at Pixie Grace on Letterboxd and Twitter.
On the Twitter and the Letterboxd, likewise, at Baron Ronan.
On the Twitter. I like that.
The Twitter.
I know all the Twitters.
All the Twitters.
I've got all of them.
I love Brian
Some of
Gleason.
my best friends are Twitters.
Yeah, that's in
Logan Lucky.
Logan Lucky. I know all the Twitters.
Yeah. Emails, facts, I can do
I
it for
can
you.
do all of it.
But yeah, I co-host another podcast called The 250, where each week we discuss a new movie on the IMDb's top 250 movies of all time. This week we're discussing a new entry. It is Toy Story 4, so join myself and Andrew this Saturday at noon. We'll be talking about that. Follow us online at The 250. Listen to us SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever. Follow me on Darren_Mooney. The underscore is actually an underscore, and my middle name is not underscore. Take it easy. We'll be back next week.
Tremendous disagreement.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.